The high-profile trial against actor and producer Alec Baldwin is right around the corner. This comes after numerous attempts by his defense attorneys to toss out the case. Baldwin is charged with involuntary manslaughter in relation to the fatal 2021 shooting of cinematographer Halyna Hutchins. Hutchins was killed during a rehearsal for the Western film Rust after Baldwin fired off a Colt .45 revolver which had a live round in the chamber, killing Hutchins and injuring the movie's director, Joel Souza, when a bullet lodged into his shoulder.
I don't have a clear memory of how long I was standing behind her. I know I got up behind her to try to see on the monitor, and there was an incredibly loud bang that was not like the half and quarter loads you hear on a set. Those are sort of, they're loud poofs and pops. This was deafening. And it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Souza would eventually give a first-hand account of what happened on that tragic day. The movie director took the stand during the trial of Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, the film's armorer. During Souza's testimony, the prosecution slowly eased into his background, asking how he came to know Alec Baldwin as well as Halyna Hutchins, and he recalled being impressed by her earlier work.
How did you become involved in the movie Rust?
I had made a movie called Crown Vic that came out, I think, in 2018 or 2019. And there was a time when the actor Alec Baldwin was going to be starring in that movie. And as happens with independent movies, you get ready to go, your financing falls apart, you push the boulder uphill again, your financing falls apart, you rinse and repeat endlessly, sometimes it seems like. But the schedule sort of ran out on us, and he wasn't able to star in it. He stayed on as a producer. After that movie, he liked it, and I think he felt like he missed out or something. So we talked about doing another project together with him as an actor. And I had a couple of things in mind, one of which I wanted to make a Western. And he thought that sounded interesting. And so he hired me to write the script.
Okay, so you actually wrote the script for Rust.
Yeah.
And how did Ms. Hutchins become involved in the movie Rust?
So over time, just generally as a director, if I would see the work of a cinematographer that I admired, I would just make a note of it, make a note of their name. And I had seen a trailer for a movie she did. I think it was called Arch Enemy. And I just was impressed visually. It looked like something that was sort of it fit my style. And so I looked into some of her other work, and I had added her to a list of other names I had put together over the years. I can't remember what publication, if it was an American cinematographer or something like that, but they had named her one of 10 cinematographers to watch. That's a big deal.
During the time that you knew Ms. Hutchins, did you get to know anything about her background? Yeah.
I mean, she has this backstory that you don't forget when you hear it, right? I mean, she was born in the Ukraine, and but she'll tell you, she says, "Oh yeah, I grew up in this naval submarine base in the Arctic Circle," and you don't hear that generally every day.
When the state asked Souza when he met Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, the film director said they initially met over the phone as they were discussing her role for the movie.
One of the folks from the production office, I can't remember if it was Gabby or Roe, had told me that they had found an armorer. They told me that it was Halyna Gutierrez-Reed. I had, of course, heard of Thel Reed. In the business, who hasn't? And so they told me that they had found her. I was keen on having what's called a show and tell, where you would basically have all the weapons that would be used for the movie more or less laid out on tables, and you would then match the cast up with what looks best for their characters and makes the most sense story-wise. And so I wanted to have that, and so the production had her call me, and she introduced herself to me, and we spoke over the phone the first time then. And then a few days later, I can't remember exactly how much, it was a day later, a few days later, I met her in person at the show and tell, and then she was training people that day as well.
And at some point, I presume that filming begins and a lot of work begins. Is that correct?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, the pre-production itself is an enormous undertaking as well. But we eventually got to our first day of filming, yes.
Souza explained to the jurors he did have limited experience working with armorers on set.
Can you tell the jury generally what your understanding was of where the armor is supposed to be if the actors are using their prop guns that are real? They're real revolvers that they're using as prop. Where's the armor supposed to be?
Basically off camera. I mean, there's crew on set, so you'll sort of behind the camera, there are grips, there's the operators, there's sort of the people that are sort of where the camera can't see them, and you would generally expect the armor to be just sort of standing off screen, ready to hand or retrieve when we're starting or finishing the weapon.
Okay.
Yeah.
Were you ever under the impression, based on your experience, that it would be appropriate for the armorer to leave real weapons with actors and then leave the area?
No, that wouldn't be what an armorer should do, at least in my experience.
Okay. And can you give the jury an idea of, at the beginning of the filming of Rust, did you even understand what a dummy round was?
Not really. Like I said, I didn't have a lot of exposure to that kind of stuff before. I wonder, I don't exactly have a clear memory of it. I have a feeling the first time I heard the word dummy is after everything happened, to be frank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever recall any safety checks where you saw Ms. Gutierrez shake rounds before loading them into the gun?
I never saw anyone shake around, no.
Thank you. What is your understanding of the overall I would say, for lack of a better word, the overall amount of power that the armorer has over the firearms and ammunition on the set?
Well, I would say that specifically since it's such a safety matter and it's such a specialized matter, that there's really no one on set that should be able to override the armor in terms of the weapons, the ammunition, how they're handled, anything. What the armorer says goes.
And would that include the star actor and producer, Mr. Baldwin?
It would include anybody, yeah.
To the best of your recollection, was there ever a close-up scene of an actor or a stuntman loading or unloading the lever-action rifle that was assigned to Mr. Baldwin?
No, there was not.
Based on your understanding of the scenes in the script, can you think of any reason that dummy rounds would have been placed inside that rifle for filming?
No, I think if my memory serves, I believe the only thing that rifle was going to be used for it was, there's one scene where it fires and accidentally kills somebody. But we were never going to have the rifle fire in any way because it's an underage actor in that scene holding the weapon, and so we were just going to CGI the gun blast.
When the state questioned Souza about what happened on the fatal day of October 21st of 2021, he explained prior to the deadly shooting, half a dozen members of the camera team were planning to leave the film, which ended up putting Halyna Hutchins in a different job position on set.
And were you particularly concerned about whether the cameramen that quit were disgruntled or had any malintent towards the filming?
I wasn't concerned about anybody having any malintent. I think there was a decent amount of acrimony between them and the production office and producers over some things that have been sort of going back and forth. I think they sort of, as they should, they tried to sort of, keep that thing away from me. But I hear things, what's going on? You want people to be happy. You want people to feel good about what they're doing. So,
did you think that the camera crew's decision to leave was somewhat reasonable?
I don't know. That's a tough one. I wouldn't want to answer for them. I knew it was going to put us behind the eight ball a little bit, but then again, people have their concerns. People have bills to pay. They have their own needs. At the end of the day, they did what they did. When they left, I went and shook hands, and I had no hard feelings, and I hope they had no hard feelings toward me, and said I hope we would work together again, because frankly they were pretty darn good at what they did.
So what was the plan for the day?
The plan for me, as I saw it, I sort of took Dave, our first assistant director, aside, and Halyna, and just said, look, I think we all understand when you look at this day's schedule, we're not going to make this. This is not going to happen. And what I don't want to do is start short-changing the scenes that we have in front of us. What we're going to do is we are going to do the scenes that are in front of us. We're going to do them properly. We're going to work our way through. And whatever's left at the end of the day, we can't control that. That's left at the end of the day, and we'll have to figure out tomorrow. But today we're going to do what we can.
Souza explained the plan for the day was to film a scene with a character named Wood, where he brought a few lawmen into town. Then after, the scene they were focusing on took place inside the church, involving actor Alec Baldwin.
And if were those scenes filmed in such close proximity that dummy rounds may be advisable?
I think a few shots, yes.
Okay. And what happened when lunch was over?
Lunch was over. Everybody migrates back to the church, and you pick up where you left off.
Were you inside the church immediately after lunch was over?
Yeah.
Did you stay inside the church the entire time between when lunch ended and when the shooting occurred?
No, I at a certain point went outside of the church.
And why were you doing that?
So when we were setting up the camera angle, we were talking about what the shot was supposed to be. And forgive me if I over-explain this, but the scene is very tense, right? And so you achieve that through editing and camera angles. And so you want to see Rust sitting there. Is he dead? Is he alive? The men coming closer. They're ordering him to give up. And then you cut to close-ups, and you're cutting from the character to the lawmen back and forth. And the first shot was supposed to essentially be the first moment we might realize that Rust is not, in fact, as injured as we might have thought. And so it was going to be a close-up on the weapon coming out of the holster. And so we had talked about that a little bit. Halyna and I had talked, and there's Reed there, Serge was there. They're talking about the lighting. And then at a certain point, it's time to set the camera angle up. It's not a rehearsal yet. You're just sort of what they call auditioning the shot.
So at any point in time, did you see Ms. Gutierrez enter the church with the firearm?
No, it wasn't. I wasn't aware of her coming in or leaving or anything. The church was, there's an enormous amount going on. A million voices, it feels like. The special effects guys are rigging things up in the roof for debris for later on. When the shooting starts, there'll be debris falling down, and there are people working the lights. There are people moving the cameras. There's a lot going on, and so I didn't really register that.
Do you have any idea who provided Mr. Baldwin his revolver for the scene?
No, I mean, just beyond in a general sense about who's supposed to hand it off, but no, I didn't see anybody give it to him.
Okay. At some point, does Mr. Baldwin get his revolver?
I mean, he clearly had it. The interesting thing, I never saw him with it. I mean, he clearly had it because of what happened, but when I went in to look at to see what was going on with the camera angle, I remember there's sort of a big group kind of hovered around where he would be. He would be sitting in the pew. I just couldn't see him. I'm not the tallest guy in the world. And so what I wanted to do was get up behind Halyna to try to sneak a look over her. There's a little tiny monitor on the side of the camera to at least see that, to see what it was looking like. But I never even got a look at that.
Then Souza recalls in the next moments, he saw blood.
Okay, so explain to us when you're going into the church and why and what you do and what happens.
So I went inside again to try to see what the angle was. There were a lot of voices. I heard Alec's voice. I heard Halyna's voice. Everyone sort of talking at once. I don't have a clear memory of how long I was standing behind her. I know I got up behind her just to try to see on the monitor, and there was an incredibly loud bang that was not like the half and quarter loads you hear on a set. Those are they're loud poofs and pops. This was deafening. And it felt like somebody had taken a baseball bat to my shoulder. I remember that distinctly, and sort of stumbling back and shouting. I don't remember exactly what I said.
Were you able to see Ms. Hutchins at that time?
I did. I remember sort of stumbling back, and I either fell to my knees or I was sitting, and I distinctly remember her being lowered to the ground. People had her sort of by either side, and I still didn't quite know what had happened. Nothing made sense. I remember initially thinking, had she been startled by it, and they were sitting her down as a result, and then I saw the blood on her back.
And to the best of your recollection, what happened after that?
It got very chaotic. I remember them laying me down. I remember them laying her down next to me. Although we were sort of facing in opposite directions, my head was this way, her head was that way. I remember a lot of panic. I still just couldn't figure out what had happened. I thought, was there something that had been stuck in the barrel that came out? But just nothing made sense. I remember our dolly grip, Ross, coming to sort of grab me and trying to call me, and then Matt Hemmer came in, and between the two of them, I remember they sort of tended to me and were pulling up and just trying to find out where there was a hole.
Do you recall, Mr. Souza, at any point in time during that general time after the gun went off, having any kind of an interaction with Ms. Gutierrez?
I remember at one point looking up and her standing there with another person or a few other people, and she looked distraught. And I remember her saying, I'm sorry, Joel," and I remember somebody just screaming at her, and they just ushered her out.
Okay. At some point in time, were you taken from the scene?
Yeah, it's funny. When I hear later about how long we laid there, it felt like 5 minutes. And I remember looking over and her looking back at me. And she had the biggest brown eyes I've ever seen. And then, but I don't remember who they took out first. They put me on some kind of stretcher and rolled me out.
Souza says he was taken to a hospital in Santa Fe, but begged emergency responders to take him with Halyna Hutchins, adding he was in complete disbelief he was shot with a bullet.
And when you were at the hospital, did you have an understanding that you had been actually shot by a bullet?
No. I mean, I knew something got me, but they kept talking about this bullet, and it could not compute for me. I just kept saying, you don't understand. No, this was a movie set. That's not possible. You don't get it. And they kept saying, no, it is. And I just keep insisting, you don't understand, because this is not possible. It's just not possible that there's a live round. It just can't. And then they eventually made me grew tired of my protesting about it, because they showed me the x-ray of my back, and there was a very large bullet in it.
Okay. And sir, do you know whether Ms. Gutierrez was inside the church at the time that the gun went off?
I don't know.
In your experience, would you have had an expectation that she would have been in the church?
Yeah, the armor would be where the gun is.
While under cross-examination, Hannah Gutierrez-Reed's attorneys questioned Souza about his previous work with armors and the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG's, safety rules on set.
So, Mr. Souza, I think before you testified that before the Rust movie, your experience with firearms was on Crown Vic. Is that correct?
Yeah, more or less, yeah.
Okay, and that was a movie you directed.
I directed and wrote Crown Vic, yeah.
And you wrote that, okay.
Yeah.
And that, I think you said, had a couple scenes involving firearms, is that right?
Well, where guns were fired, there were a few, yeah.
So you had an armorer on that set? Was that armorer full-time?
He was there for the days that the guns were going to be used or fired, yeah.
Is that the only occasion you've ever worked on a set with an armorer?
Yeah.
Okay. So is it fair to say your experience with working with armorers was fairly limited prior to
Up to that point, yeah.
Okay. So are you familiar with the SAG safety rules, where if the armorer or prop master are not present, a responsibility falls on the AD?
I don't think I ever really reviewed the SAG rules. I don't think I would have been aware of what the procedure would have been if the armor wasn't there. I think my assumption was always that the armor was supposed to be there.
Okay, and you made an assumption, but if there's a SAG rule that indicates that responsibility then falls on the AD, are you aware of that?
That's not a rule that I'm aware of, no.
Okay, so you have not reviewed the SAG rules with respect to armors in general, or firearm safety in general?
No, I'm not a SAG member, so.
Okay.
But no, I haven't, no.
Okay. So if in the church at that time, Ms. Gutierrez-Reed was not present, and you don't remember?
I don't.
Okay. But Mr. Halls was. He was the first assistant director, correct?
He was the first assistant director, yes.
Now, you don't remember, I think you said, seeing who handed Mr. Baldwin the firearm.
That's correct.
And I think you said, sir, you don't remember Mr. Baldwin even having the revolver. You didn't see it. I mean, he had to have had it, but
I know he had it before lunch.
Yeah.
I know he had to have had it for obvious reasons, but I didn't see him holding it in that. It never got to that.
okay. So before lunch, did you see who handed Mr. Baldwin the revolver?
No, I remember at some point before lunch hearing Dave call out Colt gun, but I don't remember who handed it to him.
Okay, and that's Dave Halls?
Yeah.
And Mr. Halls called out cold gun before lunch that you remember?
As I remember that, yeah.
Okay.
The defense would end their line of questioning by asking Souza who is usually the safety officer on set, which he replied everyone, but mainly the first assistant director, which in this case would have been Dave Halls.
And you talked about on the second go-round on your direct, you completed the Rust filming?
We did.
And on that second filming, did you use wooden dummies?
I wouldn't even call them dummies because they didn't ever get loaded into anything. when there was a situation where we had to match previous shots, like on a bandolier where somebody had what would look like bullets, the armorer on that go-round had made them out of wood and then painted them and tucked them into the bandoliers.
Okay. And you know that the purpose of a dummy round is to look very like a live round.
Yeah.
Okay. When it comes to safety on the set, who is the person in general that's responsible?
Well, I think in a general sense, I mean, the first assistant director is the safety officer on set. But beyond that, I think it also, you know, there's a set is generally a reel if you see something, say something, things. So everybody is responsible to some degree to try to make sure there's a safe work environment. In terms of our safety officer, and generally the first AD is the safety officer.
And what you just said, and first AD is in charge of that, but if anybody on set sees something unsafe, they should say something.
Yes, I think an example would be if there's a extension cord that's not taped down, or there's something that someone could hit their head on or something. You want to try to head those things off. There are a lot of sharp corners on movie sets.
Now, ultimately, with regard to safety, the producers are where the buck stops. Do you agree with that?
I think the producers are the people who write the checks are generally where the buck stops on everything in life. I don't think a movie set is any different.
Mr. Baldwin, when you talked about earlier about the armorer saying something to him, did you ever communicate to the armorer if she had issues that she needed to confront Mr. Baldwin or tell Mr. Baldwin, or did you ever say anything about that?
I don't think we ever talked about that. I think she and I might have had 2 conversations all told.
Okay.
But that wouldn't have been one of them.
Okay. And would you agree with me, Mr. Baldwin has a fairly strong personality in that movie?
Sure. I think, yeah.
And we saw some clips on that. Finally, you mentioned that the day 3, you felt good about how that went, and it was an amazing team of professionals, I think you said, that pulled together and did a good job. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think we had a very strong crew.
And Ms. Gutierrez-Reed also performed very well that day.
Yeah, on that day I didn't take any issue.
Yeah.
I was happy with everybody.
Okay.
Hannah Gutierrez-Reed would ultimately be convicted of involuntary manslaughter. During her sentencing hearing, Souza spoke out again as he told the courts when Halyna Hutchins died, the world lost a gifted artist and a compassionate person.
The last 2.5 years are difficult to put into words. What it's done to me and the burdens it's placed on me, both emotionally and physically, are my private burdens, and I think I'll choose to keep them that way today. What I will say is that one moment the world made sense, and the next moment it didn't, and it still doesn't, and I don't know if it ever will again. So again, what I really want, I can't have. I want everyone damaged by Miss Reed's failures that day to find peace. I want this whole thing not to have been consumed by the world as some sick form of mass entertainment. I want to still believe in the better angels of our nature. I want the pain to go away. I want to be who I was before this happened. And above all, I want Halyna to be back home with her husband and son in the house she never got to live in. Halyna not only had an incredible talent for her art, but she had a talent for life. She was a touchstone for all who knew her, and those of us who were lucky enough to have shared in her fleeting time on this planet are better for it.
During the hearing, Gutierrez-Reed begged the judge to release her on probation.
First and foremost, my heart aches for the Hutchins family and friends, and colleagues as well. And it has since the day this tragedy occurred. Halyna has been and always will be an inspiration to me. I understand she was taken too soon, and I pray that you all find peace. I am beyond grateful that Joel survived that terrible day. My heart goes out to the film industry for the devastating pain that this tragedy caused and the old wounds that have been reopened. I am saddened by the way the media sensationalized our traumatic tragedy and portrayed me as a complete monster, which has actually been the total opposite of what's been in my heart. Your Honor, when I took on Rust, I was young and I was naive, but I took my job as seriously as I knew how to. Despite not having proper time, resources, and staffing, when things got tough, I just did my best to handle it. Today, I humbly ask you to consider probation, a probation where I can contribute to society through community service, and I can continue my counseling, and I welcome any classes that you may deem necessary for me to attend. I give you my word now that I would strictly follow the rules and respect the parameters of that probation. I beg you, please don't give me more time. The jury has found me in part at fault for this god-awful tragedy, but that doesn't make me a monster. That makes me human. Thank you.
However, her apology wasn't enough to sway the judge, who later ordered her to receive the maximum sentence of 18 months in prison, which she is currently serving in a New Mexico women's facility. With Alec Baldwin's trial right around the corner, Rust film director Joel Souza is listed as a witness in his trial as well, too. Baldwin faces the same charge as Halyna Gutierrez-Reed, and if he's convicted, could face the same punishment of 18 months in prison. Reporting for Law&Crime, I'm Elizabeth Millner.